Hi, and welcome to Series 2 of our People First interview series, where we shine a light on great companies that not only do interesting and cool work, but most importantly, look after their people. Identifi Global is a market leader in personalized career management and talent acquisition, specializing in high growth sectors such as the legal tech, fintech, clean tech, and biotech, future transport and mobility, with great candidate experience guaranteed. I'm excited today to be joined by two of our current clients, Laura and Joe from the Motor Insurers Bureau, MIB. Did you know that every 20 minutes someone is injured by an uninsured or untraced driver? MIB is a not-for-profit organisation whose mission is to keep dangerous drivers off our roads while making sure their victims have access to compensation. Hi Laura, hi Joe, how are you?
Hi Peter, good, thank
Hi.
you. Thanks for
joining.
inviting us onto the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. So a couple of let me do a brief intro for you guys, and please tell me a bit more about yourselves as well, and for the listeners. So Joe is the head of candidate and employee experience at MIB and heads up the recruitment and HR operations. Joe is an experienced HR professional with 20 plus years of recruitment experience across all areas of recruitment, including executive recruitment. Joe has worked for the likes of NHS, Shell, Co-op, and Corn Ferry. Laura is MIB's resourcing partner and certified HR professional. Laura has worked her way up through the company at MIB and starting out as a personal injury claims handler, and has been with the company for over 20 years. So that's quite a feat, Laura. It's you liked it so much you thought you'd stay.
You know, when I first joined MIB, I didn't really know what kind of organisation I was joining, to be honest. I was very young, and MIB seemed like a good organisation to join. So, but I think, you know, I've been very fortunate to be able to move around within the organisation, and that's certainly kept it really interesting and exciting for me. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that I've been here for so long.
Yeah, it was fantastic. You don't see it much these days, so it's quite nice to see. It's used to be, you know, you joined a company and stayed there for a long time, and but now people tend to move naturally, you know, quite often now. And Joe, you've obviously, you know, you've worked with some huge organisations, and you've been settled at MIB for a little while now.
Definitely. I've been here nearly 4 years and I can't tell you how quick that time has gone. I'm so sorry about my throat. I've just come back from having COVID for the first time and I've got a terrible cough. But other than that, I'm absolutely feeling well. So for me, MIB is like, well, it's a not-for-profit. And I'm from Bolton, so, you know, coming all the way down here to work for a company was a real big change for me. But I think what happened was in 2018, I lost my father in the May, and then I lost my job in the September, and I kind of was like umming and ahhing about what I wanted to do, and just thought I just want to go outside my comfort zone. And coming into MIB was actually a promotion, so I was always in that recruitment space, maybe team leader, kind of looking after teams, but never a manager. And I started off as the recruitment manager when I first started. So like Laura, you know, I developed and was promoted last year to look after the HR ops team as well as recruitment. So yeah, it's been a big journey.
Yeah, no, it's great, and it's great to see. And you know, as you know, this podcast is about shining light on great companies that value their people. And this series is focusing on about fostering high performing culture in today's remote working environment. And like you say, you're from Bolton, so they've clearly embraced that, you know, for a little while. So, but before we get into that, tell me a bit more about MIB, and you've got quite a unique sort of approach and position in the market. So even though you're in the insurance world, you're not an insurance company per se.
No, like you said, Peter, with our intro, you know, we are a not-for-profit organisation, and we've been going since 1946, since the first motor insurance underwriter was in the market. So we've actually been going for quite some time. We're a very small company. We're on like 400 workforce in Milton Keynes. So if you've never used our business through, you know, the wonderful stuff that we do through our claims, you've probably never heard about us. So our brand is very small, but our social responsibility is absolutely massive, as they say in Bolton. We work with and on behalf of the Insurers Association to reduce insurance fraud. And like you mentioned, we take uninsured and untraced drivers off the road. And to do that, we work with a lot of organisations like the Police, Department for Transport, Ministry of Justice, local government, etc., etc. I'm sure I've missed a lot of organisations out there. But we also liaise with our counterparts in Europe, and as part of our Cross Borders Association, we have a lot of representation in Geneva, which is the European legislation. So we try and influence there through our Chief Technical Officer, who does our public affairs and does a lot of work over in Europe. And you mentioned there one of the stats around, someone is hit by an uninsured or untraced driver every 20 minutes. But actually, it costs the UK economy £2 billion a year for uninsured and hit and run drivers. And we work really, really closely with trying to get all of those people off the road. So it's when you get in here, it is a unique organisation. I've never worked for a not-for-profit, so I've got no kind of mirrored effect about what a I can't even speak, not-for-profit actually looks like. But it's a very unique business, and everyone in this organisation is invested in what we do socially. We're very emotionally attached to the organisation, and we want to do what's right. You'll get that across the board.
Yeah, because people, when you say not-for-profit, they automatically assume charity, don't they? And they don't understand that. But you're funded by the insurance market. Is that right?
That's correct. So if the Insurers Association have a bigger market presence, they will pay us more. And the levy, yes, that's how we get our money. So we go to the insurers and say, right, this is how much we need this year to do the work that you've asked us to do. And depending on the market share, they pay us more. But actually, it comes down to anyone who has motor insurance. So as a person with motor insurance like myself, I will pay my insurance about £60 that actually goes to the levy. So you're paying for it yourself in your motor insurance, and that's why we're trying to do some good work to reduce that cost to you as a car driver.
Yeah, so for me personally, the insurance, paying for insurance, and it's one of those things that you pay in case stuff happens, and you hope that it never does, but it happens, doesn't it? To the best of us, and so it's quite it's quite poignant for people, isn't it? So it's a very unique position in the market. You have a very unique purpose, if you like, in the market which you serve. How's that reflected in your values and principles? Because for those that come to you probably don't know what you're all about. Then how do they buy into that?
So we actually relaunched our principles at the beginning of the pandemic, actually. So it was always our plan that we was going to review and relaunch what our principles were. And we'd done a lot of work beforehand with the rest of the organisation, really making sure that the organisation were brought into what our values and principles should be. So we did some all staff workshops, and really got everybody involved, and it was a really good opportunity actually for everybody to have some input as to what they think about MIB and what they think that we should be and what we stand for. The launch of the principles was due to take place the week that everybody got sent home from the office. And so we had these really big plans, in terms of how we was going to do it. We had an all-staff town hall that was organised, and everybody was going to go to that. And then we all got sent home, and it made us question, right, what do we do now? Because we wanted, we'd brought everybody along the journey with us in terms of actually putting our principles together, and we wanted it to be a big celebration as to what it was. So we really had to rethink about how was we going to do that now that we was all in our living rooms and in our dining rooms. But we did a really good job actually of still making sure that it was really embedded in the organisation. and that our principles are something that is lived and breathed within, the people that work for us, and that's really important to us. So our 3 principles are think big, inspire, and customers first. And I think that they're all really reflective of the work that we do and what we stand for. So in terms of think big, we, as Jo said, we're an organisation that has been going for a long while, but we need to make sure that we stay relevant and that we're moving forwards and that we don't just become complacent in terms of what we do. So think big is really about making sure that actually, we're looking to the next thing. We're looking at how we can continuously improve and how we can push forward and remain relevant and continue to provide the best service that we can to our customers and to the people that work for us. Inspire is just about, being your best self and actually making sure that you enable others around you to do the same. So, we have a really strong ethos about bringing your whole self to work and making sure that actually, whatever your challenges are, whoever you are, you don't have to leave that at the door. You can bring that into the organisation, and we want to know about it, and we want to be able to create an environment where people can have open discussions and be honest. And we're happy to be really inclusive in terms of the people that we employ and the environment that we create. And then customer first, I think that's the one that probably resonates, with everybody because we've got so many customers. And as you say, we're funded by the insurance industry, and we're accountable to them. We're using their money, and we need to make sure that we do that wisely. But then we've also got victims that are relying on us to provide a good service. And so, we've got customers everywhere. And we need to make sure that that's at the forefront of our minds and that we're making sure that whatever we do, we're putting them in front of that, and treating them as fairly and as best as we possibly can.
Yeah, and they're fantastic. And those who came up with those values, was that, because you see this a lot, right? You go walk into a company and they've got some fancy words written on a wall, typically with some beanbags chucked around it, and people walk past it every single day and never, and yeah, if you ask someone in the organisation what are our values, our principles, they probably might remember one because they walked past it, but how did you come up with those?
We started off with something very different, didn't we, Jo? So we started off with probably about 5, and they were really quite lengthy. They didn't really relate to anybody. Nobody could, as you say, nobody could tell you what they were. And then when we did the workshops, again, we started off with something quite different. So we went in with some ideas as to, these are kind of some of the things that we think. There was things like be brave, love MIB. So we had, quite a variety of different things, but we needed to make sure that actually the people that worked here connected with it. And if they didn't, then there's no purpose in continuing with those. And so there was lots of discussion around why those principles, why they're important to us, and how people interpret those and can, translate that into their everyday lives in the work that we do. So it was really engaging and interactive. And I feel as though it really has come from the people that work from us rather than from, top-down approach, which I think does make it much easier for people to use those every day in what they're doing.
Did they change at all? Like, you mentioned you're about to launch them at the beginning of the pandemic. Did that cause any changes, or did they stay as they were?
The principles stayed as they were. The way that we launched them had to change.
Okay.
So because we was going to have a great big buffet lunch, and everybody was going to come in and celebrate and have these big meeting rooms where everybody was going to come in. We was going to have some games around the building so people could interact with each other and just like make it really fun and bring it to life. And what we did instead was we still had things, we still had meetings, we still had the engagement, but we had to do it through Teams. But we sent out some goodie bags to all of our people. So and again, it was just so that it was something fun. We wanted to do something fun. It's a big celebration to launch some new principles, and we didn't want it to be these are what your principles are. Get on with it. So we sent out some goodie bags, and the goodie bags had all sorts of different things inside. So a pen, a notepad, the bag itself. I think there was like a stress ball and things like that. So and it all had like our new branding on it and the principles. just so that we could still try to celebrate it and bring it to life for people. And that went down really well, actually. And again, I think just during the pandemic, because everybody was working from home and we wasn't used to that, and people were struggling with that, so that was it was another excuse, if you like, and another way for us to just to keep that connection going with the people that were at home. And we did an awful lot of that throughout the pandemic, but the principles were certainly one way of doing it, to make sure that actually we could keep connecting with people, keep that communication going, and keep the engagement going throughout that really difficult period.
Yeah,
And
that must
if I
have
could
been-
add there, Peter, sorry to interrupt you before your next question, what that working group did, so there's about 40 people on the working group, and then they went back to their business areas and added what they needed to. They actually organised about 4 people to go to Exco to present what principles they would like and why.
Okay.
And I think they only had like a 20-minute slot on the Exco, and they stayed the whole hour, because the engagement from Exco and the passion that you could see from the people were really inspiring. So I was in that meeting myself for another reason. I had another agenda item. And just to listen to them, was really inspiring, really inspiring. And everyone agreed. Dominic, our CEO, was like, "Yep, just go ahead with it." And they were supposed to be having a T-shirt made. Well, they had T-shirts made and was going to go around that first day with the T-shirts and the principals to have a chat with the team. So Exco were getting involved too.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it must have been hard, but at the start of the pandemic, I guess people's priorities and thoughts weren't really within the company, and worrying about what the values are. They're worrying about whether they're going to survive and what they're doing, being locked down, things like that. So to be able to engage people from a remote perspective, is no mean feat, really. I mean, it must to hear that people still engage with that, and you manage to to inspire them through that period, is is quite something. But so obviously you moved to being remote. You had to. I mean, you had no choice. Because you weren't always a remote company. You were office based, weren't you? So
Yeah.
obviously the pandemic forced you to change, like a lot of people. And what was it like for you guys at that time?
Well, I think we both have a view, if you don't mind, Peter, because obviously
Yeah.
Laura was in a different role then.
Okay.
And as her role, I'm not going to speak for her, but as in her role as HR business partner, she saw a different side of it than I did from a recruitment side. So we probably both have a different story, which is quite nice, actually, because we don't always have the same experience here, do we, as employees?
Exactly, yeah.
So I'd say to you, it was quite difficult. We only had agile working previously. So if you wanted to agile work or work from home at any point in time, you had to go through a process of some kind. So actually, our CEO decided he wanted to protect us from the pandemic and not give it to each other and not be poorly. People were dying, of course, which was the absolute, extreme of COVID and the pandemic, which was really sad. And as a small organisation, we are a single point of failure in some areas, whereby there is only one person doing that one job. So to protect us, he had already foreseen remote working, and had already started from his Exco level to start getting people working from home at least a month before it hit us, so that at least Exco weren't in a position where, if Dominic was poorly, nobody on the Exco team could do that CEO role. So the Exco team had already been split, and I'd already started to work from home at least a month before that, to protect us. So that was always his wish. He didn't want any he wanted to protect us from a COVID perspective. But it was really hard, because our contact centres in particular had never worked from home before.
Yeah.
So they actually came in, sat at their desk, went onto their PC, and never had laptops. So you're actually sending all of your workforce at home without any tech, without any laptops, with restriction in, everybody being on the same server at any one time. So it was, I'd say the first few months, all of our town hall, and we had weekly calls just to go through things, were all about technical things and what we were setting up and how many extra laptops were being ordered by our ISS team and being delivered and couriered to our workforce. We also thought that, you know, from a people perspective, you know, depending on your own home circumstances, it might not have been ideal. You know, I'm okay, I live on my own. And although, you know, loneliness and isolation was some of the things I kind of took from the COVID and working from home, other people had full families at home without potentially having a protected room where they could do their work. So everyone's circumstances were slightly different, but trying to get onto this work-life balance. But we did eventually get there, but very much at the beginning, we did struggle, which I'm sure like most companies did as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've continued to work from home for 2 years. So we decided we have 2 locations. We have Milton Keynes and London. And in our Milton Keynes office, we had already got some money from our Insurers Association to refurbish our Milton Keynes office. So as our London office was going back into their offices and being back in a hybrid way, Milton Keynes located employees were asked to just stay at home still, or if they wanted to go to London, they could, until the refurbish had finished, which finished in April this year.
You're in the middle of a refurb. I mean, that's these little things that people don't, you obviously didn't foresee the pandemic coming. Nobody did, and you go ahead and start your office refurb. And we've known some companies, completely, they've done a refurb, then had to rip it all out again because the whole office space has changed, and the need for that office space. Whereas it used to be sort of one-to-one type meetings and lots of little rooms. Now it's more collaborative meetings to get people in because they're working from home, and big office space and big, big meeting rooms with big round tables in, so everyone can come together. So, yeah, it's interesting, and you've got a different viewpoint, Laura.
Well, not necessarily different. I mean, I wasn't in the resourcing team at that time. So, and I was personally, my own personal experience. I have 2 children, and so I was one of those people that had 2 children who had expectations of homeschooling. I was working and trying to juggle all of that, and my husband also working at home. Wasn't our ideal situation at all. But I think as an organisation, as Joe said, Dominic, our CEO, was so forward thinking. He didn't wait until the government said everybody needs to work from home. He made his own decision really early that actually we're not going to put people at risk. If they had vulnerable people at home, then they worked from home very, much earlier. And that's always been his priority throughout the whole of the pandemic. His priority has always been we're keeping people safe, and we need to keep the business going. But our priority is we're keeping people safe always. And I think people have really recognised and appreciated that. And then I think from a business partner point of view, it was always about, throughout that period, how do we keep people connected? How do we make sure that those people that feel isolated, that actually get their energy from being in the office and like to work with other people and now might be struggling, it wasn't just the fact that people were working from home, the whole pressure of the pandemic and having family members that were poorly, it was really mentally challenging. So we did an awful lot of work in terms of our wellbeing space so that we could try and keep people connected and actually make sure that we was providing whatever support we could to make sure that people felt as though they had somebody to go to, or they had something that they could connect with. And whilst people were busy during the day, and that was all really good, during the lockdown in the evening, once you shut off your laptop, people quite often the feedback was, that's when I need something, that's when I'm really struggling, because then I'm on my own and I don't have anybody to talk to. So we did lots of things. We provided some coaching. So we had a wellbeing coach that came in and provided coaching on a number of different topics, and we put it out to the organisation as to what topics are of interest to you. It might be healthy eating, it might be how you get regular exercise, it might be your workstation, how you set yourself up for work and how you take regular breaks. It might just be being present with your family and how you shut off from being from work and then transfer into your family life. We also did some online exercise classes, so we had some online Zumba and Pilates classes that we was running through a short period of time, so people could join to that. And again, there was lots of really positive feedback, and people just, again, you know, we're all just sitting at our desks, and so an opportunity to move around and get some exercise and do it in a fun way with some of your colleagues. Not everybody wanted to be seen, you know, sweating in front of their colleagues.
I was gonna say, yeah, no, it wouldn't be good for your mental health if you saw me do online Zumba.
So yeah, there was a few people had some different concerns in that space, but again, you know, it's something that was really well received. We did some online art classes. We set up a book club, so that actually out of hours. Then we had some meetups where people, virtual meetups, of course, where we was all reading books and then coming together every couple of weeks to talk about, you know, what was good in that space. So there was an awful lot going on, just to make sure that if we could do anything more, we were trying to do it, you know, just to make sure that people felt as though their physical and their mental well-being were being supported, and that as an organisation, we still provided that connection. It wasn't just all go home and visibility is lost. And as Jo said, you know, we set up these town halls, which at the time were happening weekly, and that was just a really good opportunity to hear from our CEO and the rest of our Exco team as to what the priorities were. It was, you know, it was like a crisis moment. You know, it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing as an organisation? What are our priorities are? And it set people's mind at rest, because actually our priorities were just making sure that you're safe, recognising that you've probably got children at home, and you know your time isn't going to be spent fully on your day job, and we know that. And how can we be flexible to make sure that we can adapt to that for you? And you know, we did a lot of work to actually just try to make lives as easy for people as possible.
Yeah. I think
And
what I loved there
Peter,
was the variety of the things that you've provided, and you know, I think that's one of the hardest things when putting in benefits and support mechanisms and, you know, opportunities for people, is that everyone is different. You know, it's like arranging a team night out, isn't it? Is that, you know, not everyone wants to go and have a drink, not everyone wants to go karting. It's like trying to find something, and so having a variety of different things and support mechanisms in place for different people. There are absolutely people that will get a massive kick out of doing Zumba. There's others that completely hate it, you know, and there's people that want to rebook. You know, I love that. I love the fact that there's so much variety in there, and being able to support people. Sorry, Jo, what was you going to say?
I was just going to say, Laura's very modest, because actually she led the wellbeing strategy over the last few years with a very small handful of people who were so committed to bringing up different ideas that, you know, that push from that small group made a massive difference. And even if that group came up with 10,000 ideas, if it helped one person, that was the purpose of the wellbeing group, certainly. And Laura's gone on from strength to strength, which is not talked about mental health first aiders, and we've continued that work, and we've refreshed the group.
And you know, I think that's it's a testament to you guys as a business, is that, you know, a lot of the times they're sort of you know, they're signpost things that people put on, isn't it? You know, oh yeah, we've got that so that we can tick the box so it looks good on the benefits page, but actually implementing them and people using those benefits and having a team of people that are motivated, you know, just goes to show that the purpose and drive in your culture. And I think that's you see it a lot. People say, yeah, we have all of these mental health first aiders, and we have, you know, a telephone number you can ring if you're feeling sad or whatever, you know, and they're all great things, but most of the time they're never used, and they're never implemented. So it sounds fantastic. But you guys are only just returning to the office, really, aren't you? So I mean, what's been why have you waited so long? Like some companies have just gone, you know, let's get back into the office. So why have you taken so long?
Well, we refreshed and refurbished our Milton Keynes office. So our London office went back a lot earlier because we rent the property in London, but we own our building in Milton Keynes. Okay. So we refurbished it. So I think the air conditioning, you know, not actually being in the building for a couple of years, like most people, you know, went and had a look at it with a fresh pair of eyes and thought, actually, there's quite a lot of fundamental stuff that we need to do. And it was very old-fashioned. You know, I don't think we've had the building since 1946, but if you ever walked in it before, you know, the pandemic, it was quite proper 80s, you know, big wooden desks. very isolated rooms for certain members of Exco team and stuff like that. So we'd kind of started a refurbishment on a very small scale before the pandemic, where we started to open up the rooms. So our Exco members actually sat with the teams in an open plan office. So we already had plans to refurbish it. It just was put on hold. And then when we kind of felt good enough to walk around it with a fresh pair of eyes, we thought actually we need to do our air conditioning and we need to refresh this and etc. etc. So that took quite some time.
You're not, you're as an organisation, you're not, you know, you've got much more flexible working than before, haven't you? So even though you've got these fantastic new offices, you're not saying, right, we've got these new offices, you must all come back in. You offer more flexible working and remote working options now. But what was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so we wanted to re-engage with our employees and say, actually, how do you want to work now? We'd taken some external market data as well and thought, actually, people have taken that time. People had been furloughed. We're very lucky that we don't meet that criteria where we could be furloughed. So we all had a job still and continued to work throughout the pandemic. I suppose for me, and my view would be that it was very much a time where the external market, everyone had had time to think about what they want, everyone had started changing careers, and it was a completely different way of working. Our whole lives had been turned upside down. Nobody had probably ever gone through that before. And it was really similar in the way that, what do we want to do as an organisation? We've been looking after our people in the pandemic. Shouldn't we give them an option of working in a different way? So, of course, we'd invested all of this money into the new offices and we wanted to bring people back in, but from a social element as well. There is a lot of stats and data out there about actually coming back into the office and working part-time at home, part-time at work, from a development, creative ideas, still getting teams together. And sometimes you can only do that in a working office environment. So there's stats to support both ends. And we didn't want to kind of try and dictate, you need to be back in Monday to Friday, 5 days a week, or Monday to Saturday, because some of our contact centres used to be open on a Saturday as well.
Okay.
So we have a pilot at the moment,
okay.
Which will finish at the end of August. And out of that pilot, we will think about how we want to work for the future. So we're doing it as a pilot at the moment because COVID is on the high at the moment. So we're currently working probably 3 days a week from the office. And because COVID is kind of rife, we've reduced that to 2 days a week. But some people are working differently, and on a one case by case basis, people might not be coming into the office for a week or so, depending on what their agreement is with the line manager.
Yeah, I think well, yourself included, right? You recently contracted COVID, and it allows organisations to carry on, and allow people, if they're well enough, to do some work or even work part time. And we've had a case recently, and the individual said by 12 o'clock he was completely wiped out. So we would say that's fine, just work in the morning or work as much as you can, or don't if that's the case, depending on how you feel. And that flexibility, I think, is the thing that keeps things moving these days, is is recognizing that whether it's COVID, whether it's children, whether it's family members, whatever the situation is, that actually you're missing out on some really fantastic people, just because there's this old rigid mentality of you've got to be in the office 5 days a week. And whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, every organisation will have their reasons and their policies for doing that. But having that wraparound flexibility, saying, okay, well, there's always going to be people that sit outside the norm. And actually, if you're really invested in talent and actually just getting great people, then let's break the mold, right? And let's see what we can do for people. And you know, I love that mentality about you guys, that you know, it means you're going to win the talent race, right? And I've talked about it many times, that I used to call it the flexibility drain. You know, got someone, you know, if you think about even just beyond that, people in wheelchairs, you know, people with, you know, learning difficulties or whatever, you know, actually, you know, by being flexible, if the role is right, then you can get hold of some really fantastic people that can really take your organization to the next level, if you're prepared. And of course you've got to have the support mechanisms in place, which you guys have, and you've got to have the tech issues in place and things like that. So yeah, and have you seen is there a benefit? Has there been a benefit to your organization, other than just obviously keeping hold of your people and things like that? Has there been any sort of noticeable changes from either business or people perspective?
I think in terms of from a resourcing point of view, so you know, we are continuing to do our interviews online, and that just means that actually we're much more flexible and adaptable to the candidates, and people can come for an interview with us much easier and quicker. So you know, that certainly helps. And I think, you know, letting people continue to work from home, as you say, it just gives them the flexibility. So, you know, we know that people have lives and people have children, and, you know, the work isn't the only thing that goes on for them. So allowing people to continue to stay at home for a period of time and have that flexibility is really beneficial. But equally, I found, you know, coming into the office, there's certain things that are done better when you can be sat side by side with somebody. You know, for example, some training, you know, we've done a lot of training, we've recruited a lot of people over the pandemic, and we've had to obviously train them up during that period. But actually sometimes sat side by side with somebody, you know, doing training face to face, showing somebody, you know, whilst they're sat next to you on a screen, we found that actually there are some benefits to doing that. And then just having meetings, it's just nice to see people face to face, isn't it? You know, so when I'm interviewing, I quite like to interview with the manager in the room. So although the candidate might be through the screen, you know, me and the manager are sat together, and that's really nice. So that, you know, it hopefully eases the interview in terms of any technology problems if we're both in the office together. And it's just nice that it's an easier conversation sometimes when we can be sat together. And then equally, you know, we've on sort of some of the less formal things, you know, we've got a pool table in our office. So I had a meeting with our CISO over a game of pool, which was fantastic. You know, it's just much nicer to be able to do things in that way rather than just be sat looking at your screen. And again, I think just from a health point of view, it's not healthy to be sat looking at a screen all the time. You know, you need to have a break from that. I'm getting more steps in now because I'm actually walking around the office and getting up and moving around rather than sitting in my dining room. So there's definitely some you know, benefits to both, I think.
And I think also as well that that your values around bringing your whole self to work, I think it allows you to do that more often. You know, when you know you're going in, it's purpose. You know, whereas over the course of the week, you're going to have off days, right? You're going to have days where, you know, just not quite. You know, you don't want to be chatty. You just want to get on with your work, or you want to get your work and get home because you've got something else to do. And I think, you know, when you have that flexibility, then you are able to bring your whole self to work, and I think it makes for a more productive environment.
You get
Recently,
better gossip as well, Peter.
well, exactly, yeah.
You do when you're in the office. You overhear information, conversations, and all sorts. So you do have the ear of the organisation when
And
you're
who
in.
doesn't love a bit of goss, right? So if the pandemic wasn't enough for you guys, you were already going through quite some significant change before that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago now, actually, we started a big transformation program, which was the 3-year transformation program. I think the driver behind that was really just to make sure that we remained relevant. You know, as we've mentioned a couple of times now, you know, we're a well-established organisation, and actually some of our technology and our processes, you know, they hadn't been kept as up to date as we would have liked them. So we needed to do some work, and we recognised that actually we needed to make sure that we were brought more up to speed with the rest of the market, and actually, you know, where we can get ahead of the market. So that was really around kind of technology capability, and then, you know, lastly was people and culture. So, you know, we had a whole work stream and a whole year that was dedicated to people and culture. So and it was, you know, the drivers behind that is about experience. You know, we want our customers, our employees, our candidates all to have the best experience that they can. And actually, we didn't have the right technology and capabilities in place to do that. So yeah, it was a lot of work. You know, there was a lot of change, and I think, you know, that's one thing about us. When you think about a non-for-profit organisation, and you've mentioned, you know, people associate that to charities, and people might sometimes think of MIB as being, you know, like some sleepy little charity, and we're far from that. You know, we're quite a fast-paced, you know, lots of change organisation, and there's lots going on. So, you know, we've got lots of BAU, but we do have lots of really exciting projects that are taking place as well, because we're continuously looking for improvements. In order to remain relevant, you need to keep moving, and you know, we know that. So there's lots of change going on, and you know, whilst we had that 3-year transformation program, that doesn't mean that you know, everything's done. We recognise that there's still more to do, you know, and sometimes it is just about keeping the momentum of what we've got started. So, you know, we can do all that great work, but if you stop it, then we end up falling behind again. And it is a lot about just keeping the momentum going and keep looking forward. So yeah, lots of change going on, lots of still projects and programs that are taking place. So it's still, you know, quite an exciting and fast-paced environment to be working in.
Yeah, I think you know, it's an important point, because a lot of people associate change with chaos and disruption, and you know, perhaps an organisation, you know, they tend to blow with the wind, so they don't really know what they're doing. You know, change is just a case of, you know, job changes and things like that. And yeah, so people often find those environments quite intimidating. But actually, the change that you've been talking about, you know, that sort of that capability, that culture, you know, and your technology and driving that forward is progressive, which is bearing in mind you are a not-for-profit, you know, you're doing all of those things on quite a large scale, and you know, with that progressive mindset, as opposed to, you know, we're just trying to keep our heads above water. So I think that's really important. What was remote working part of that change? Had you factored that in?
No. No, not at all. You know, we didn't plan on remote working being part of that change at all, but I think in some ways, you know, I think it has made us see the benefits of doing that. And as you say, you know, we can attract talent from further afield because we can offer that, you know, more flexibility. And remote working certainly has its benefits. It's caused its challenges, but it has its benefits. And so it wasn't a part of our plan, but we soon had to factor that in, and it became part of the plan.
Yeah. And you've obviously gone around, you know, that's part of your culture now, and part of the work you've been doing is around changing your culture. And one of my old sales managers a long time ago said to me, "If you can't change the people, change the people." And it terrified me, and I was like, wow, that's brutal, right? But you know, sometimes there's probably an element of truth in there, right? But you haven't, right? I mean, you've gone through a lot of change, and obviously that has meant your organisation has had to change different skill sets and things like that. So I get that, but changing a culture isn't easy, right? As we talked about earlier, it's putting some organizations put some fancy words on a wall, and you know, some bean bags, and you know, think there's our culture, and it's much more than that. So it's a big question. I do appreciate this, but how do you go about changing a culture in the middle of a pandemic in a remote working environment? You know,
Yeah.
Where do you start? I mean, you must have literally been banging your head against the wall.
Well, as you know, and like other companies know, depending on how big your company is, depends on how long your culture program lasts, because I think it's just always evolving, and it takes years and years of doing different things. And you know, as you do changes, you're bringing new people in, you're losing you know, experienced people because you need to change and upskill and reskill. And you can constantly change in the dynamics of teams and people. So it's really hard. I must say the pandemic really helped us exponentially, our culture program. So we did a lot online, like Laura was mentioning. We sent out goodie bags, We did a lot of social elements to help with our culture change. Like you said, you know, we rooted out bad behaviour. We set standards around what behaviour we expected, and if you know, we had a shout out. So if you're not seeing what you're supposed to be seeing, if you're not seeing inspirational leaders, you have every right to actually call it out. So that was very much our motto behind rooting out really bad behaviour. I think our culture programme it kind of started off with a video online from our CPO at the time, Jordan Barry, and you saw him, you know, kind of kick-start that from home whilst we were all working from home, and he started to plant some seeds, and it's kind of started to grow. And we had various games. We had a half of the organisation was sent radish, half of the organisation was sent lettuce, and we had a lettuce versus radish competition. So everyone had to see how they were growing, and that element was kind of, we were trying to subconsciously say, you know, this is how you grow culture. You have to start from the bottom up, and it's through those types of things, and through you know, showing great behaviour, showing inspiring leaders. We'd already changed our principles by then, so that was a good kickstart from us around, okay, so can people actually talk about our principles? Can they actually say it? Like Laura was saying in our interviews, I can't tell you how many people didn't know our previous values that we're doing an internal interview. You know, what's our values here? They couldn't name them.
Yeah.
But if I kind of went into any team and said, right, what's our 3 principles? They would be able to name them really well. And that's why we particularly kept them simple.
Yeah.
What do you think, Laura? Is there anything I've missed there around?
You know, I think in terms of changing the culture, it is, you know, we're not a huge organisation, and the benefits of that is that we do have direct interaction with our CEO and with our exco, and we constantly heard from them, you know, what they wanted this organisation to be and what was important to them, and that's always been a really clear message that we've had, and we've heard it, you know, from them directly. It's not been diluted. We've seen them on video or through a screen and given us that message. But I think it also goes back to not just hearing it, but actually seeing the changes. So anybody can say, you know, we want to value our people. You know, lots of organisations say that, you know, our people come first, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by our people. But it's then seeing those changes. So one of the things that we used to do is we used to clock in and out. So we used to have a clocking in and out machine. People used to come in and you know, register their time in, register their time out. And one of the very first things that our last CPO did was say, we're not going to do that no more. You know, we're working with adults. Let's treat them like adults. And actually, you know, if they say that they're going to work the hours that they're working, then let's rely on them to do that. So there was lots of actions. We talk a lot about caring about our people and making sure that their families are supported. And then during the pandemic, we put in place a carers network, because we've got a lot of people that work for us that are carers, and they have elderly parents, they have disabled relatives that they're looking after and supporting. And during the pandemic particularly, a lot of their support was taken away. Some of the respite care was taken away. The carers weren't allowed to come into their homes any longer. And so, you know, our CEO was the person that said, what can we do to support these people? How can we better support them? So we put in place a carers network really quickly. We developed a carers policy. We now pay our carers to have up to 5 days a year as paid carers leave, so that actually when they've got medical appointments, or when they need to go and do the shopping for their elderly parents, or when, you know, their parents are poorly, or they're lonely and they need a visit from the person that's caring for them, instead of our employees having to worry about using their annual leave or taking the time off, we've put this policy into place. So I think a lot of, you know, changing the culture, it's not just about saying all the good words that anybody can say. It's about actually making sure that those actions mean something and that people can see them, and there's some visibility around that.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm getting from you guys is that you know, you genuinely care, and you know, it starts with, as you've said there, you've got your team together and said, actually, what are our principles and values? What does it mean? You know, you've taken that from what you've listened to what they've said, you implemented them, and then you started to build everything around those, as well as your additional add-ons. I mean, you've mentioned there that sort of carers network. I've not come across that before, and that's quite unique. And you're putting a whole set of initiatives that can support your people, and you're listening to them and understanding that everyone's different, and that's quite unique, right? That is quite unique. It's it's typically, as we keep saying, here's our benefits, there you go, see you later. Now you're in a fortunate position where you're evolving and you're going through that change, so everything is up for negotiation, but I do get a sense that that's going to be ongoing, and I think I really like that. What other sort of initiatives have you put in place then that you mentioned the carers network? I think that's fantastic. What other things have you done?
We wanted to support our line managers well, because they were the ones on the forefront of actually talking to the team. So I know that Dominic often said in the town halls, line managers, get close to your team. So we were constantly on a day-to-day basis speaking to our team, making sure that they were all supported either mentally, emotionally, through technology, and had all of the tools that they needed to keep them well. And one of the things that Dominic created was a line managers meeting. So we met every fortnight. And the reason why he wanted to do that, so there was just him and the CPO, and with the rest of the line managers, so that he could hear directly from line managers about what the challenges of the teams were, either emotionally or technology led. And what was stopping them doing a good job, or stopping them doing their work, and stopping them keeping them well. So that was a really fantastic, and we continue to do that. It's obviously got a different kind of vibe now, because we're working on what our future is and what some of the challenges will come across. But that line managers network, actually, we were asked to go on a coaching program, so that we were all set up as coaches and mentors, and we could really help get our people thinking about some of the solutions themselves, because we're not all perfect as line managers either. We can't think of everything, and our teams are the ones that are on the forefront of those customer kind of interactions and what they're hearing. So it was kind of a really good starting point for having inspirational leaders, but also coaches who will help them. But Dominic in particular and our CPO were fundamental around what they're seeing, what's coming down the line, what the business need, well-being being the forefront of it, and then what the teams were saying. So we could all really get together on that and hear what actually the problems were.
Love that. I think it's in fact very first time I've heard that where there's a specific focus on the line manager, because I think they were the forgotten people in the pandemic. Everyone was looking after the employee and everyone was treated as an employee, whereas the managers were forefront, having to, all of a sudden, there was always normally a boundary between the manager and the team, isn't there? That's just the way it goes. But all of a sudden these managers were being launched into people's homes, having one-to-ones, asking if they're all right. They're not trained for that sort of stuff. And I think they were forgotten in this pandemic, because they weren't trained for this, so then they had to get better at it, and some have, and some still prefer that sort of face-to-face meeting aspect, and having that blend I think is important. But all of a sudden, especially when you're having difficult conversations in somebody's home, about work, there's a different level of management needed and knowledge and in that particular point. So I think that's great to hear that, and very unique. I've not come across that yet, so I love the sound of that.
I think they needed. I was just going to say, with the line managers, reflecting on how difficult it was, that was really, a test to their emotional resilience as well during that period of time, because some of the conversations that they were having, they were being everything to everybody. They really had to, there was pressure from, for them to support their people. But that can be quite a big emotional drain. And so actually, we needed to make sure that we was providing some outlet to them as well, and making sure that they were being supported, because, as you say, they weren't trained. We did provide mental health training to all of our line managers, so that they did have some understanding as to some mental health issues, and could ask some good questions to try and get that from people and to best support people. So that was something that we did across all of our line managers, as well as the coaching program. But as you say, yeah, I think it was a real test on their own resilience and, you know, their emotions in terms of the support that they were having to provide.
Yeah, it's like, who's asking them if you know, who's
Yeah.
being trained to, you know, to do them, and it's typically, you know, senior execs like you're talking about. So, you know, having that constant touch point with, you know, senior management would have definitely helped them, and it will give them some of the resilience that you're talking about, that mental resilience, because that's what you do when times are tough. You look up, don't you? You know, you look upwards, and you know, God knows who the CEO looks up to, maybe God or someone like that. I don't know.
I think it also just created the network between themselves as well, so they didn't have to keep looking up. You know, by having those line manager calls and putting everybody in the room together virtually, meant that not only did they have somebody to look up to and somebody to ask those direct questions to that was more senior to them, but it also helped to build that network between them, so that where they perhaps didn't know the other line managers as well or hadn't worked with them before, they then felt more comfortable to reach out to other line managers and say, I heard you talking about this on that call. I've got a really similar problem. Could we just have a chat about, you know, how did you handle that and what did you do? So it's really helped to kind of strengthen those relationships.
Yeah, fantastic. And what are any other sort of initiatives that you think that that have come out of the result of, you know, remote working and the pandemic, and part of your culture change?
I think we've got a number of networks. So I've mentioned the Carers Network.
Yeah.
Our very first network was our Beyond Pride network. So that
Okay.
wasn't as a result of the pandemic. That was actually started before we went into the pandemic. So that's probably been going for about 4 years now, which is our LGBTQ plus network. We've also got our Reach network, which is our racial equality and cultural heritage network. We've got our gender equality network. So we've got our parenting group. We provide buddies. So one thing that we did do in the pandemic actually was we set people up with buddies for people that were going on maternity leave, because again, just recognizing, you know, I've had 2 children. I was very fortunate. I was able to go to antenatal classes. I was able to make friends that had children, you know, at the same time as me. Going through that during a pandemic, wow, you know, you don't have that. So it can be quite an isolating experience. So what we did, you know, and it's just a small gesture, I think, but what we did was we buddied them up. We took a group of volunteers from our organisation who had perhaps recently returned from maternity leave, so had just gone through a similar experience. And then when people were going on their maternity or paternity or adoption leave, we gave them the option to buddy up with somebody, and then throughout their paternity, adoption leave period, they then had somebody that they could stay in contact with, not to talk about work things, not for an update as to what did we discuss in the last town hall, to talk about, oh my God, my baby was up till 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
So that was really nice, actually. Just again, recognising this is a real change of circumstances for these people that are now leaving our organisation. Whilst they're with us, we can provide that support. Then once they go for, you know, up to 12 months, what happens to them then? And, you know, not everybody's in the fortunate position that they've got lots of friends and family. So that was something that we offered.
Yeah.
We also did sorry, Peter.
No,
We also did like a 12 days of Christmas. That was a wonderful piece of work that our learning and development team did. And we send out a goodie bag to everybody at home. And every day, our one EXCO member, so for 12 days, an EXCO member took sight of what the value was, what the principle was, what we wanted to talk about on that day, did a video. So you listened to the video, and then you had an activity to do on that day. So you could do that throughout the week. So we had 12 weeks of the 12 days of Christmas, and it was fantastic. So I think one of them was you had a cardboard cutout of Elf on the Shelf, and you had to put it in different places. So if you were on a meeting, you know, someone could have had it in the background, and someone took a picture and pulled them up onto our Yammer channel. And it was really interactive. Some day you were craning, some day you were painting. Sunday you had to just talk about something that really went well that day and speak about it in your team meetings and things like that. So that 12 days of Christmas, I can't tell you, we had so much chatter on our Yammer, on our Teams channels about how wonderful it was. And because Exco were getting involved as well, it was all talked about at the town hall, and it was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I mean, not everybody got involved at every point, but I absolutely thought it was the greatest thing ever. Greatest
Jo,
show on earth.
Do you remember how we ended it, Jo, with the choir?
Yeah.
What was
So we
that?
had a Christmas choir,
Oh yeah.
and it was
So
a
we had,
song.
again,
Yeah.
it was just volunteers from within the organisation that we got to sign up to this choir. Doing it remotely wasn't very easy. What we
No.
didn't realise when entering into it is that you can't all sing together at the same time on Teams because it just blocks people out. So we had to find different ways of doing it, but we it was a fantastic medley that we did of Christmas carols. And then on our last town hall, before we finished for Christmas, we played it to the organisation, and it was brilliant. It was really, really good.
Can you still access that? Is that somewhere like, is that available? For
That
people
is
to-
somewhere. It is
Yeah.
somewhere.
Hidden away now.
It will be somewhere, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, you guys have, really, if you haven't caught someone, it's not through design. It's, it looks like you've given something to everybody there, and it sounds amazing. Is there any culture initiatives that you used to do, or do differently now? Now that you're in a remote sort of hybrid type environment, and yeah, maybe stuff you did before the pandemic but you don't do now, or during the pandemic, is there anything that you've changed or done differently?
I think it's evolving every time. We had a new, we've had two separate big teams that we've never had before. So we had a GPO team, which is our group privacy office. So they do all the DPO stuff, data protection. We need that to be a bit more mature in our organisation. So we created another business unit as such. We don't call them that here, but just to make everyone aware. And then we also had, what was the other one I was trying to think of? The change team. So we had a change director last year, just bring our framework up to speed. And that's now created our change of projects. And we have distinctive big projects that we need to do over the next couple of years with BAU projects underneath that. And that's created a lot more people, a different set of skills. And again, it's that when you bring another dimension to the culture, it changes it slightly, and you kind of, trying to change and evolve it as we go along. I'd say that we want to continue to be the culture we are. And we'll have to change with times, either socially, politically, what we're here to do. And I'm sure there are plans in the mix around what our next 3 to 5 year strategy is. I think our plans personally is, from a resourcing perspective, my role is to make sure an employee has the best experience they can, because everything's individual. And I also look after the team from a candidate experience. So there's also an element of me and Laura will still ensure that line managers know what good looks like, and we support those line managers that need it from an interview perspective, and challenge some of the people, that they think should come in where appropriate. The wonderful thing is that whereas in bigger companies and other companies I've worked in, line managers always had the last say. Actually, it's different here. Recruitment have the last say. So even though they can technically do something, if they are poles apart from where we need to be or where we are as a culture, we will actually say no, and that will be a no about that candidate. So that's something very unique that I've never, in my 23 years of recruitment, have ever seen before.
Yeah,
The wonderful thing is, sorry, go on, Peter.
No, I was gonna say it's very unique, yeah.
The wonderful thing is that is supported by everybody. So even, if I had I don't know, me and Laura had exco recruitment, or you're interviewing with Dominic and you're saying to Dominic, got some issues there, and this is what I'm seeing. He'll really listen, might challenge me on it back, that he saw this and he saw that type of stuff, but it is a conversation. This is not just people saying one thing and recruitment saying, no, I don't think so. And then it becomes a conversation. This is, if they're not culturally right, they won't start, and recruitment have that last say, which is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And often you're absolutely right. Often recruitment is not supported. It's seen as a function that just gets people through the door, and whereas actually the recruitment team, the HR team, are the heartbeat of the business, and actually that culture is because you see every part of the business, don't you? And whereas often not teams, departments, business units, they tend to be quite insular, and you can get different cultures within different teams, can't you? So to have a CEO and exec team that support that is fantastic, and probably testament to why you've been able to change that culture and get that through. Whereas often the blockers are at the senior level. Sometimes it's people like yourself that are really passionate about changing these things, but realistically, all the owners want to do, or the CEOs, all they want is just the bottom line profit and things like that. So and anything else that you've done differently since before during the pandemic?
I think just getting some great candidates. We're a really small brand. We not many people have heard about us, so I think we do a lot of work with our agents. So colleagues in particular are our brand and our culture as well, so they are sharing, they understand, and we invest a lot of time with them to make sure that they are an extension of our brand, and they are making sure that people know that when they come into our culture, they're empowered, they can be themselves. I have never said this before, and I'm not just saying it because I live in MIB. I was going to say I work in MIB, but I can be myself, and I hope I'm an inspirational leader. I'm certainly, I have the people at my forefront of my mind as a manager. I'm not perfect by any means. I would like to be a little bit more polished. But, I can go to Dominic and have a conversation, or I can go to any exco member and have a conversation and just say, I'm really fed up today. And I'll tell you some of the challenges that I'm coming across. But it doesn't sound like I'm whinging. It doesn't sound like I'm moaning. I can just be myself. And in my own words, and I've had feedback on 2 strategies I did recently. I did a recruitment strategy a couple of years ago, and I did a new talent acquisition strategy a few weeks ago. And because I did it in my own words and I didn't try and professionally fluff it, Exco really bought on board with it. And I can truly be myself. So if there's anybody that takes anything from today, it is, you can be yourself here. You will be the technical expert. We will be expecting you to be the technical expert. We're not asking you to come in and then tell you what to do. We're actually getting you to come in and be who you are, and we will accept that. And I'll be honest with you, when you speak to people, I speak to family, I speak to friends and all sorts, and they say, well, do your team follow you? And it's like, no, my team doesn't follow me. I follow my team. They're the experts. They're the technical people. And I will go to them and say, what do you think? What would you do in this situation? What's best practice? I don't have all the answers, but the team might, and I follow my team.
Love that.
And hopefully other managers do that as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned earlier about you changed the training, and because you did it online, but you worked out that it's better, on site now. So what happened there? Is it just a case of how did you work? What was going wrong? What mistakes were you making to realise that it had, it's better done face to face?
I think we've had, you know, as part of our transformation, as we've mentioned, we've had new technology, and some of our technology has impacted, you know, some of our largest areas in terms of the changes that we've made. And actually just rolling that out to such big areas, you know, it's doable, and you know, we've managed to do it, and people understand the technology, but actually, do they understand how to optimize it as best as it can be used? Probably not everybody. And I just think that doing that so wide scale through a team, when you can't see people's responses, you can't see their engagement, you can't actually then see how they're using it, because then they're just going and using it in their living room or their dining room or their, you know, their office space at home. So I think it goes back to then having people sitting in the office and saying, oh, you know, this aspect of that technology, that's great, isn't it? And then somebody will say, oh, I didn't know that we could do that. I didn't even know that. And it's overhearing conversations sometimes where you wouldn't have that at home, because you do what you think you've been taught to do, and then you just get on and do it. Whereas actually just having those open office conversations where people will go, you know, saying, this is a really good enhancement that we've just had put in, you know, this is how I'm using it, and somebody else will say, actually, I've not tried using it that way, let me try that as well. And I think that that's really what's helped with some of our training, because you lose that completely when you're just sat in isolation at home. So the basics, you know, we're really good at training here, and actually we made sure that everybody understood, you know, what they needed to get the job done. But it is just those enhanced areas that you get from, you know, listening to conversations, hearing how your team are using it, and then picking up on that and saying, actually, can you show me that? You know, can you just turn around on your desk and, you know, let me have a look at your screen and show me how you've done that.
Yeah. And learning and development has advanced quite a lot, hasn't it? And people learn at different points. So people physically want to be in an office and they can share ideas and get ideas, not, you know, from each other. Other people just want online stuff, and it gets it, excuse me, it gets in there in the head. And then you've got like a completely different element. So we had a lot of new starters that started in the pandemic that never actually came into the office, never actually met their line manager in person and that type of stuff. So a lot of our pre-start stuff and our onboarding had to be changed, because we used to use like this wonderful, you know, 50,000 forms that a new starter had to fill in on their first day. And so we used to, you know, send these big paper forms to our line managers saying, that's what you need to, your new starter to complete. And then, you know, we had to electronify a lot of that. We did some pre-start videos for as part of their packaging of an onboarding. So as long as, you know, they continue to have conversations with line managers before they started, you know, this is what to expect on your first day. But they had some pre-start videos, some great intuition around some of the things that MIB do, but in a simplified way, to just keep them engaged, because we had lost some people, depending on their notice period, from when they started to when they, you know, from when they offered to when they actually physically started. And we lost people along the way because we weren't actually keeping in touch with them. That was our old culture. It's not happened in the pandemic, but that was just to keep them abreast of, you know, what they needed to do, and to keep them introduced to what we do here at MIB, and keep them engaged before they started.
So important, isn't it? That onboarding process, you know, is, you know, when they're coming into the office, you know, it's a little bit easier. But even then, people still used to get it wrong. You know, you come in, there you go, fill out the forms. There's your desk. There's the coffee machine. Get on with it. You know, that onboarding now has to start from when you make the offer. You're absolutely right. You know, whether it's 1 month, 3 month notice period, you know, that whatever happens in that period is a reflection of your culture. I'm a strong believer of that. When you start, things tend to sort themselves out, but that gap, you know, what happens in that gap is really important. Now, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but something needs to happen. Then you've obviously got that onboarding, and it's even harder now in today's remote working environment. You know, those first critical days, you know, and you talk about there, Laura, about, you know, using their systems, that you're doing it remotely, and they're not using the systems effectively, which makes them less productive, then they get frustrated, and then they're not doing the job, and then the manager's like, oh, you're not very good, and you know what I mean? And yet it could have been resolved from the minute you made the offer through to onboarding them. And I think it's so critical now for success of attracting and retaining talent, but also, you know, the success of your organization. You know, if that person isn't trained properly and onboarded properly, it doesn't make them a bad candidate, it makes you a bad company. But you know, if you, yeah, there's got to be that meeting in the middle there. And I mean, with that in mind, I mean, have you seen any increase in productivity and perhaps or decrease in certain areas of the business since you know, working remotely, perhaps certain teams, or you know, why do you think that's happened, if so?
I think
it's
when, sorry,
sorry,
Jo.
go on, Laura.
I was just going to say, when we first went home, there was absolutely a decrease. You know, people were rummaging around trying to find out how to work this, and you know, with homeschooling and technology problems, we couldn't all get onto, as Jo said, you know, there was connection problems, we couldn't all get onto the server, and it really did, you know, slow us down, and it was really quite frustrating actually during, you know, that first few months. But I think, you know, it's just adapting to that. You know, we've provided people with good frameworks to work in and provided them with the flexibility that they need. And actually, I think that productivity, you know, people want to make it work. You know, the people that like working at home, it's in their interest to make it work, and so they do. You know, and you know, that equally there's some people that were the first people waiting at the door when we opened our doors again, and they're in 5 days a week because that's what they love. And so, you know, people want to make things work, so that actually it can continue and it works for the organisation and for them. And so, yeah, absolutely, our productivity dipped, and we fully, you know, knew that was going to happen. But with time, you know, it's just a matter of working out how you make it work again, and you know, we got there eventually.
Definitely, and for me, I messed about. You know, I wasn't used to working in a home environment. I didn't even have a desk. I think I was working on the settee for the first few weeks. So it's your home. You know, you want to watch TV. You don't want to be on your laptop. You want to be putting your washing in and things like that. So I really struggled, and I had a conversation with my manager and said, I can't work from home. I'm crawling the walls here. It's like 3 or 4 weeks in. I'm crawling the walls here. I live on my own. I've had enough of my own company now. I need to, you know, work, and being in an office feeds that social element in me. So I really struggled at the beginning. But then there's just an adjustment part, isn't it? And since coming back into the office, I'm less productive in the office because I want to go on and chat with everybody, because I'm a social butterfly, as they say. So I want to go over and chat. So I actually get less done in the office. So I kind of think to myself, right, well, I'm looking forward to going back in the office. I can be really social. I can have conversations, and then I don't have to copy it with an email and things like that. And my emails are still going up, and I'm still having the conversations, but they're more on a personal level. So I like working from home so I can get stuff done. But I think it's just, we need to allow for that adjustment period. Just getting back into work, you can still have a conversation while you're working. You know, how was your hair? Did you have your hair done this weekend? You know, that kind of stuff. So you can still hear those types of chats going on, which is great, because that's the whole point of being in an office, isn't it? And changing the culture.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. There's been some really fantastic stuff in there, and I'd like to just finish on a couple of quick fire questions. Okay, so get your thinking caps on. So, your top tip for building a remote working culture?
Listen to your people, take care of them, and they'll do the rest. Give them the technology to do what they need to, and they'll do the rest. Don't know if you have anything different, Laura.
Or do you want to add to that? Or you think that covers it?
I think just keep connected. Just make sure that you keep that connection going, because, you know, it's really difficult if people feel as though they've lost that connection emotionally or anything else. And so make sure that actually you keep your communication up and stay connected with each other.
I love that. The next one is the best working culture one that is driven from the top down or by the employees?
Employees.
Employees.
with guidance from managers.
And last one is around the best piece of tech that you've come across to enable remote working.
Well, we've only used Teams, so Teams has been our only one. We've used Zoom with other suppliers and kind of our agencies and stuff, but Zoom, yeah, Teams is quite easy for us. But that's the only tech we have.
And Yammer. I suppose we do use Yammer as well, and that was only introduced during lockdown as well. So yeah, we hadn't used Teams before. It was new to everybody, and now we can't live without it. So absolutely, that's been the thing that we've relied on. But then more from a social point of view, you know, we're quite interactive with Yammer, as Joe said. You know, when we've had various competitions or people posting pictures of their dogs and their babies and everything else that goes on, people's birthdays, then that all goes on Yammer, and that's really nice actually for the social element of things, just to keep a conversation going.
Joe, Laura, it's been fantastic. Thanks for all the insight and being open and transparent with me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again soon.